In 1815, the head of a boarding school in Maine wrote to Thomas Jefferson, asking for some wisdom to pass on to his students. Jefferson responded by sending a passage from a Stoic self-help manual, Cicero's Tusculan Disputations, that he had copied down as a teenager to console himself after his father's death. "If the wise be the happy man, as these sages say," Jefferson paraphrased, "he must be virtuous too, for without virtue, happiness cannot be." Who were these sages? And what was the connection Jefferson saw between virtue and happiness? A reading list that Jefferson first drafted in 1771 provides the beginning of an answer. Jefferson sent the list to his friend Robert Skipwith, who had asked for books to include in a private library. There, under the category of religion, Jefferson listed his favorite moral philosophers, the sages of his letter. They included Cicero, the classical writers Xenophon, Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius, and Seneca, and the Enlightenment writers John Locke, David Hume, Lord Bolingbroke, and Lord Keynes. At its core, the founders viewed the pursuit of happiness as a lifelong quest for character improvement, which requires a commitment to the daily habits that lead to self-regulation, emotional intelligence, flourishing, and growth. Understood in these terms, happiness is to be pursued rather than obtained, a quest rather than a destination. Inspired by ancient philosophers, the founders described this quest as a dramatic struggle between reason and passion. The Greek words for reason and emotion are logos and pathos. So for the founders, passion was a synonym for emotion. They believed not that we should lack emotion, only that we should manage our emotions in productive ways. In his writings on happiness, Plato argued that we should use our faculty of reason to temper our faculties of passion. When all three faculties of the soul were in harmony, Plato maintained, the state that resulted was called temperance. The founders held that the goal of education was to strengthen our powers of reason so that we could achieve the calm self-mastery that was key to personal and political happiness. The founders talked incessantly about their struggles for self-improvement and their efforts to regulate their anxieties and emotions. They created disciplined schedules for reading, writing, and exercise, and kept detailed accounts of their successes and failures in living up to the ancient ideals. In his early 20s, Benjamin Franklin made a list of 13 of the classical virtues and resolved each day to run through a checklist of whether he had lived up to each one. Daunted by all the marks on his checklist, he eventually abandoned the project. But he concluded, "Though I never arrived at the perfection I had been so ambitious of obtaining, but fell far short of it, yet I was, by the endeavor, a better and a happier man than I otherwise should have been if I had not attempted it." At times, the founders betrayed the moral ideals they set for themselves. Some spent their lives as enslavers and denied the humanity, equality, and unalienable rights of the people they enslaved. Jefferson and other enslavers from Virginia were aware of their own hypocrisies and recognized that craven greed kept them from freeing those they held in bondage, even as they called for the total emancipation of all enslaved people at some point in the future. Following the classical and Enlightenment philosophers, the founders believed that personal self-government was necessary for political self-government. In their view, the key to a healthy republic begins with how we address our own flaws and commit to becoming better citizens over time. In the Federalist Papers, Madison and Hamilton made clear that the Constitution was designed to foster deliberation. Only by governing their selfish emotions as individuals could citizens avoid degenerating into selfish factions that threatened the common good. The way for citizens to create a more perfect union was to cultivate the same deliberation, moderation, and harmony in our own minds that we strive to obtain in the Constitution of the state. In this sense, the founders believed that the pursuit of happiness regards freedom not as boundless liberty to do whatever feels good, but as bounded liberty to make choices to help develop our own capacities and talents. They believed that the pursuit of happiness includes responsibilities as well as rights. The responsibility to limit, restrain, and master ourselves so that we achieve the wisdom and harmony that are necessary for true freedom. It's not a surprise that the founders often fell short of their own ideals of moral perfection. But what is a surprise is the seriousness with which they took the quest to become more perfect. In his autobiography, Franklin called the great moral errors of his life errata, or printer's errors. He remained hopeful, as he wrote in an epitaph he drafted for himself, that life was like a manuscript whose errors, in a new and more perfect edition, could always be corrected and amended by the author.